Ladies and gentlemen, apes and apettes, welcome back to the channel. We have everything you guys need to know on the day in the broad markets with AMC Stock and much more here in this video, including B.Riley Securities issuing their Q1 2025 earnings estimates for AMC Entertainment, as well as what to look out for coming tomorrow. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive into all of this information. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel before we get into it, and let's go. So, B.Riley Securities. They issued their Q1 2025 earnings estimates for AMC Entertainment in a research report here just a day or so ago. Says anticipates the company will post earnings per share of 13 cents for the current quarter. The consensus estimate for AMC Entertainment's current full year earnings is negative 37 cents per share. B. Riley also issued estimates for AMC Entertainment's Q2 2025 earnings at a loss per share of 1 cent and full year 2025 earnings at 17 cents. So getting back to a profitability in 2025, and that's what the markets I think are going to start looking forward to in regard to AMC stock. Once we get past this court situation and once AMC raises a lot of money, we should get back to a place of profitability. And I think that will be ultimately what does power AMC stock ahead. So that's kind of the estimates that we're looking at. Now, last earnings, important to note that AMC beat estimates by about 4 cents. The loss was not as bad as people were expecting that it could be. So that was a positive thing. Now, B. Riley Securities says AMC stock is likely to actually beat earnings this time around as well, although EPS it can be very volatile. There's different accounting standards and practices, but likely to be there as well. Now, let's talk about what happened today in the markets. A couple things are notable. The American banking landscape is on the cusp of a seismic shift. Expect more pain to come. Rising interest rates, losses on commercial real estate, and heightened regulatory scrutiny will pressure regional and mid-sized banks, leading to a wave of mergers, sources told CNBC. Some of the pressures will be visible as regional banks disclose second quarter results this month. Firms including Zions and KeyCorp already have warned of shrinking revenues. And Fitch analyst Chris Wolf says half the country's banks will likely be swallowed by competitors in the next decade. Half of your banks merging into other banks, that is not good. That's really not a good sign. Now, problem is we're going to have bank earnings coming on Friday. JP Morgan, Citi, Wells Fargo, State Street, and BlackRock. If they give us some bad numbers, oh boy, markets could be in for round 2 of banking fears and this banking crisis. We'll see how things do ultimately come out. These big guys tend to have pretty good earnings, so I think the bigger story will be on regional banks. So that happened today, and that definitely didn't help things. You also had Fed Bostic that says inflation is too high and it's not sustainable. He goes on to say that current inflation is not due to excessive risk-taking, but the pandemic response. Trajectory on inflation right now is in the right direction, and Fed will ensure that does continue. Goes on to say that recession is not his baseline outlook, and the biggest risk is not moving inflation back to target. All Fed is in consensus on that view. He said, right now, though, policy is clearly in restrictive territory. Fed can be patient. So he's really stressing that maybe we don't need to see any more rate hikes, at least until we get clearer data on inflation. And this is something the markets did really like today. So this was a positive factor. Now, on top of that, you've seen bond yields fall a decent amount today. The 10-year Treasury is now breaking under 4% again, sitting at 3.998%, down about 5 basis points on the day, as well as the 2-year bond sitting at 4.862%, down almost 7 basis points on the day. And you're really seeing this broadening out of the markets. Your small and mid-cap stocks really outperformed today. This is very healthy for a bull market. You've seen Microsoft drop almost 2%. You've seen Apple drop almost 1.5%. You want to see that. And you want to see some of that money flowing into small and mid-cap companies. It creates a healthier market. Instead of 7 stocks, the Magnificent Seven, carrying the markets, you can see many different stocks carry the markets. That is healthy, and that is a positive development that we did see on the day today. Now, as far as AMC stock, AMC didn't do quite as well as other names, but AMC did go up about 1% in regular trading, up about 0.5% in after hours, currently sitting at $4.26 per share. So you're kind of trading sideways here for the past week or so, and that's better than what it could be, because you do continue to see this downside pressure on the stock, and that has subdued the stock. I mean, without some of this downside pressure, without some of the option orders that we are seeing today, in which we'll talk about here in just a moment, AMC stock would likely be a lot higher. Now, if we get a ruling from the courts this week, well, that's going to open AMC up for a much larger potential upside move. We'll have to wait and see, obviously, what happens and all of that, but I think it's either this week or next week that we do get a ruling, and then ultimately, I mean, AMC raising 5-10 billion, whatever the number is of capital, will ultimately shine through to be bullish, right? Everyone is so negative on AMC, it's probably not going to be all that negative. At least there is a positive that comes out of the negative. Usually negative catalysts are just negative and there's no positive. This time you have a negative catalyst, which paves the way for a massive win for the business itself. And that's the main logic that I have been expressing to all of you guys. As far as the markets, though, tomorrow, or really at 2 o'clock in the evening tonight, 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, you're going to get the unemployment rate for the UK, expecting that to hold steady at 3.8%. Obviously, globalization or whatnot, the world is connected. If they're doing bad over on the other side of the pond, well, it's not going to be a great thing for us as well. So, watch that if you guys are up. If not, no big deal. We'll probably react to it in the morning, especially if it's higher or lower than expectations. Now, coming tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, you're going to hear from Fed Bullard. He is notoriously one of the most hawkish members of the Fed. So it's interesting because in 2022, everyone cared what Fed Bullard had to say. When he said interest rates could go to 6 or 7%, markets sold off like 2.5% that same day. And that was during summertime of 2022. Well, he's no longer a voting member, so his words don't carry as much weight. But if he says something that is kind of outlandish that we haven't heard in a while, or something that's really good for that matter, that's always a possibility. The markets could react to it, although we haven't reacted to Fed Bullard all too much as of recently. Now, at 11:30 in the morning, you're going to get a 52-week bond auction, and at 1 p.m., you're going to get a 3-month bond auction. Keep in mind, the Treasury still has to raise over $1 trillion by the end of this year to refund the TGA. The TGA is the account in which almost ran out as we got close to a default. So that's going to continue to pull capital, liquidity out of the markets, and that could be negative. We'll see, what the demand looks like for all of that coming tomorrow. But I think the biggest story, rather than anything else, is probably going to be more profit taking in some big tech. That is definitely a possibility. As Tuesday, tomorrow is going to be the last day to trade and finalize your trades before CPI comes out on Wednesday. Now, CPI, you're expecting that to fall across the board besides your headline month-over-month numbers. You're expecting your headline month-over-month numbers to come in much higher than they did last month. So that potentially could be a problem. But everywhere else, your core year-over-year, core month-over-month, as well as your headline year-over-year, all expected to fall. So that's kind of what we're going to trade off of tomorrow. And just depending if you get a rally or a fall, that can give you some degree of an indication of how inflation is going to turn out. But ultimately, the big catalyst is Wednesday. It really doesn't matter what happens tomorrow. If inflation comes in lower than expectations or even at expectations, because the expectation is for such a large drop, that's going to be positive. Right? If it comes in higher, well, that's going to be negative. Just the year-over-year headline number that's going to read all over the headlines everywhere tomorrow, or Wednesday, you're expecting that to come in at 3.1%. Last month's year-over-year reading was 4%. So this would be a huge drop on the year-over-year numbers, and that's what ultimately could get people quite excited. Now, if we switch gears and talk about AMC again, you've seen a lot of these bearish options today, and that is a big reason why, AMC stock just cannot get a break, right? Look at some of these trades. I mean, here's an almost $6 million trade for July 21st at the $10 put, and an August 18th $10 put for $6.5 million. Sure, you're seeing some calls in here, like a $10 call for August 18th for $108,000, a $442,000 trade for the $1 call expiring this week, another $136,000 call, another $107,000 call, a couple $250,000 calls. I mean, and then you get the last 3 minutes of trading here today, a $7.5 million put for the $9 put expiring this Friday. Like, even the call activity that we are seeing now, which is more than what we have seen weeks prior, it's just nothing compared to these large put trades. And this is what is really putting downside pressure on AMC stock. And again, the stock would have done a lot better today if it wasn't for all of these insanely large orders. Now, that's going to come to an end very shortly once we get a ruling from the judge. And, it's a guessing game. Let me know when you guys think the courts are going to rule on this. I would love to hear that. Do you think it's this week? Do you think it's next week? Do you think it's a week after that? Some point in July? Let me know what you guys think about all of that, what your opinion is. Now, let's give you guys a raw overlook of the numbers as well. So, $488.15 million currently in short positions in AMC stock. Estimated short interest off free float at 22.51%. Free float out on loan at 34.5%. Shares out on loan 178.1 million. Days to cover 9.69. Cost to borrow 216.8%. And 100% share utilization. And then if we take a look at the cost to borrow fees, cost to borrow average 1,030%, cost to borrow max 1,060%, cost to borrow minimum 856.16%. These numbers are just out of this world. Like, you literally have to be crazy to take on a short position when AMC's at the bottom, at some of the lower end points it's been at within the last 12 months. And when you're faced with a potentially huge positive catalyst, I mean, sure, dilution, all of that's not good, and that's never going to be a positive, but compared to the alternative of AMC potentially going bankrupt, I mean, that is a huge positive, or just AMC being able to raise a massive amount of money. I mean, that is a huge positive. I don't understand where the logic is to be short in AMC with everything going on right now, guys. So there is that. A quick look at the technicals. The MACD surprisingly went positive today. The yellow line is above the blue line, not by a huge margin, but still showing a little bit of positive short-term momentum. And the RSI is at 40.13. Definitely not at the lows around 30. Definitely not oversold. But definitely not overbought either. You're not even at neutral, which is 50. So there certainly is room for the RSI to come higher and for AMC stock to also rise here in the short term. Again, though, besides CPI, CPI is going to be a big catalyst, and it's likely to move the markets. It's likely to move individual stocks by quite a bit. But it's ultimately the court date. That's the only thing that really matters with AMC, and that's what's going to drive your big move. That's going to drive your couple dollar move, or potentially much greater than that if shorts actually do start to cover on their short positions, which we really have never really seen that. I think that's when you could ultimately see something along the lines of a MOAS. Now, if this were to happen over the next couple of weeks, this week, you're kind of seeing the same amount of option activity for the calls and the puts. Puts have a little bit more. There's about 30,000 roughly more puts that are in the money compared to calls. But the out the money calls and out the money puts are pretty comparable. So either which way this goes, if we get a ruling this week, you see more calls head on to the option chain, or you see more puts, I think that is what is ultimately going to drive, the move in either direction is really going to be the option activity here. Now, For July 21st, that's the next big option expiration. Same story there. About the same amount of calls out the money, same amount of puts out the money, like a 7,000 more calls out the money than puts. But you have almost 400,000 puts in the money compared to 56,000 calls in the money. So big disparity there. Nonetheless, I don't know when this is ultimately going to come out. I hope it's this week. If not, I hope it's next week. Hope it doesn't take a crazy amount of time. It should be pretty straightforward to kind of overview, look at all this information from the courts, and for the judge to ultimately make a decision. So let me know what you guys expect for AMC stock here over the next couple of weeks or so. Where do you think this ruling will take AMC? I know a lot of people are still bearish on this whole court situation, but in reality, I mean, you got to look past the bearishness. What's next after the initial, reaction from this court ruling? Is it positive? Well, I think raising $5 to $10 billion of capital, as high as $16 billion, according to B.Riley Securities analyst Eric Wold. I mean, I think that's going to overtake any bearish sentiment that AMC would have at the time the judge makes her final ruling, guys. So that is going to do it for this video. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and source your comments, questions, or concerns down below in the comment section. If you guys do want to come trade with me live in real time, link down below in the description of this video as well. You guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.